The creation of the world. A story narrated according to the Holy Bible. In the beginning, before time began its infinite count, before the first spark of light broke through the primordial darkness, before the faintest whisper of sound echoed through the void, absolutely nothing of what we know today existed. There was no deep blue sky stretched like a canopy over the earth. There were no majestic mountains tearing through the clouds with their snowy peaks. There were no vast and mysterious oceans guarding secrets in their abyssal depths. There was not even a single star twinkling in the immensity of the cosmos. There was only God. He existed in perfect fullness, eternal as no human concept can express, powerful beyond any measure or comparison, sovereign over all that would come to exist. Nothing limited him in his power. Nothing preceded him in his existence. He was, is, and always will be the One, the Most High, the one who dwells in eternity and transcends all understanding. The Holy Scriptures begin with seemingly simple words, yet laden with a depth that spans millennia. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. These words, written thousands of years ago, mark the absolute beginning of everything that exists, of everything we can see with our eyes and touch with our hands, and also of that which remains invisible to human senses, but no less real. From the material to the spiritual, from the atom to the galaxy, everything had its beginning in that incomprehensible moment. This is the story of the creation of the world, faithfully narrated according to the book of Genesis. A narrative of immeasurable power, of order emerging from chaos, of beauty being woven in the void, and of a love so immense that it decided to create everything that exists simply to share this fullness with other beings. The earth, in that initial moment impossible to fully comprehend, did not yet possess a defined form. It was like a shapeless mass, without recognizable contours, without structure or organization. The void completely characterized it. Deep, dark, dense, and mysterious waters covered its entire surface like an impenetrable cloak. They were not the crystalline waters we know, reflecting the sun in their dancing waves. They were primordial waters, opaque, lifeless, without movement of their own beyond a slow and heavy swaying, like an ocean that had been asleep forever. Darkness dominated everything absolutely. It was not simply the absence of light as we experience at night, when the stars still shine timidly and the moon lends its silvery reflection. It was a complete, total, impenetrable darkness. A darkness so dense that it seemed to have substance, as if it could be touched, as if it were a black fabric covering all the still non-existent reality. Nothing could be distinguished, for there was no reference, no contrast, nothing beyond that absolute blackness that enveloped everything. But even in that scene of chaos and emptiness, something extraordinary was happening. The Spirit of God, as a majestic and mysterious presence, moved gently over the face of those deep waters. It hovered like a bird over its nest, carefully and purposefully preparing for what was to come. There was expectation in that movement, there was intention, there was love. It was as if all of creation was being incubated, warmed, prepared for birth. Then, in that eternal instant that would change everything forever, God spoke. And when God speaks, when his voice resounds through nothingness, the impossible bows before his power. Mountains would bend like wax, seas would part like curtains, and reality itself would rearrange itself according to his word. Let there be light. Just two words. Simple, direct, powerful, and there was light. Instantly, without delay or gradation, light exploded into existence. It wasn't a gradual sunrise, painting the horizon with shades of orange and pink. It was a sudden, full, glorious manifestation. The light broke through the darkness like thunder breaks through the silence, bringing luminous clarity where before there was only impenetrable chaos and absolute confusion. It was a pure, intense, radiant light, unlike any light we have ever contemplated. A light that did not come from any physical source, but simply was because God so ordained. Imagine that moment, the first light that ever existed, shining with an intensity impossible to describe, illuminating those primordial waters that now reflected this splendor for the first time. Where there was only impenetrable darkness, now there was clarity. Where there was only a black and hopeless void, now there was brilliance and possibility. For the first time in existence, there was contrast. There was distinction. Order was beginning to emerge from the chaos. God then, with his infinite wisdom, separated the light from the darkness, establishing boundaries and creating rhythm. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Two distinct realities, two different experiences, both necessary, both created with purpose. The day for work, for vision, for activity, for life to unfold. The night for rest, for reflection, for renewal, for contemplative silence. Thus ended the first day of creation. The afternoon passed slowly. The morning came with its renewed brightness, and a cycle was established. The first cycle of history, the first day of all the days to come. It is important to note something profound and wonderful. It was not the sun that created that first light. The sun did not yet exist. It would only be created on the fourth day. The light was born directly from the word of the Creator, demonstrating that God does not depend on the means we know to accomplish his purposes. He is the original source of all light, both physical and spiritual. He is the light before the light. He is the beginning before the beginning. On the second day, with the light already established and the rhythm of time beginning its infinite march between day and night, God spoke again. His voice, which had brought light into existence the previous day, would now shape space in a completely new and surprising way. He commanded the waters to be separated. Those primordial waters that covered everything, that stretched in all directions without apparent end, began to divide in a way that defied what we know about physics and nature. It was as if an invisible but infinitely powerful hand was pulling the waters in opposite directions, creating something never before seen. Some waters were kept below, forming what would become the deep seas, the vast oceans that would cover much of the planet, the meandering rivers that would cut through the future Earth like veins of life. Other waters, miraculously and inexplicably by the natural laws that were yet to be established, were lifted high, suspended above an immense expanse that God was creating at that very moment. Imagine the grand scene, enormous masses of water above, suspended as if attached to an invisible ceiling, reflecting the light created on the first day with a mysterious bluish glow. Below, more masses of water, dark and deep, awaiting their final destiny. And between them, separating them like a great luminous void, a gigantic space, a vastness that stretched in all directions. It was as if God had opened a bubble in the middle of the waters, creating a completely new environment, a place where life could eventually breathe and flourish. To this grand expanse, to this immense space created between the upper and lower waters, God gave a special name. He called it heaven. Not just the blue sky we see when we look up on a sunny day, but the entire atmosphere that would envelop our planet, the entire expanse that would separate the Earth from the cosmos beyond it, all the air that would be breathed, all the wind that would blow, every cloud that would float. Now there was room for the life to come. There was room to breathe, to move, to exist. There was air, even without the beings that would breathe it. There was order where before there had only been chaos. There was structure where before there had only been confusion. The world, which had begun as a shapeless mass covered in dark waters, now had defined layers, had clear organization, had a visible architectural purpose. Imagine being there at that moment on that second day and witnessing for the first time the sky forming. The expanse opening like a gigantic fan, the waters dividing as if obeying an invisible but powerful hand. Above, waters, miraculously suspended, shining with divine light. Below, waters patiently awaiting their destiny. In the middle, space, air, possibility, promise. And God contemplated what he had made. He observed with satisfaction that perfect separation, that emerging order. He saw the structure he was building. He saw the purpose unfolding. And he recognized that this was good. Not yet complete, for creation would continue for the next few days with even more marvelous works, but good, adequate, correct. A solid and firm step in the direction of the divine plan that would be fully revealed only on the sixth day. On the third day, something extraordinary would happen. For the first time since the beginning of creation, we would see not one, but two great works in the same 24-hour period. It was as if God, satisfied with the foundations established in the first 2 days, now accelerated his creative work with a growing and contagious enthusiasm. First, God turned his attention to those waters that remained below the expanse created on the second day. They still covered everything, still hid what lay beneath that dark, liquid surface. With his powerful voice, the same voice that had called light into existence, God commanded these waters to gather in specific places. Not that all the waters of the world would become a single ocean, but that they would come together, organize themselves, define their limits and boundaries. And when the waters obeyed that divine command, receding and accumulating in immense depressions and basins that God had prepared, something truly marvelous was revealed. Dry land appeared for the first time. Imagine the majestic scene. Waters receding like curtains being slowly pulled back, revealing what had been hidden beneath from the beginning. First, perhaps the tops of the future highest mountains, emerging as solitary islands in the middle of the vast ocean. Then, hills revealing themselves one after another, connecting to each other like a giant jigsaw puzzle being assembled. Enormous plains stretching as far as the eye could see, with their red, brown, and gray earth still virgin. Deep valleys forming between rocky elevations. Gorges opening up like wounds on the surface. The dry land in all its potential and diversity, finally visible, finally accessible, finally ready to fulfill its purpose in the grand plan of creation. God called the dry part land, and the gathering of the waters he named seas. Now, there was an absolutely clear distinction. There were visible boundaries, there were established limits, there was a diversity of environments. The seas stretched out in their deep blue immensity, their waters moving in rhythmic waves that began to skirt the newly formed coasts, gently licking the sand that had never been touched. The land stood firm in its brown, gray, and reddish solidity, waiting patiently, like a blank canvas awaiting the artist's brushstrokes for what would come next. And God contemplated this perfect division between land and sea, between the solid and the liquid, between two kingdoms that would coexist in harmony. He saw that it was good, but God was not finished with the third day. He gazed at that dry land, still arid, still devoid of any form of life, still silent and barren, and spoke again. Let the earth bring forth vegetation. It was a different order from the previous ones. God was not creating something directly from nothing this time, as he had done with light. He was endowing the earth itself with the capacity to produce, to generate, to give life. It was as if he were injecting creative power into the very substance of the soil, making it fertile, making it alive, making it capable of generating other forms of life. And the earth, like everything else in creation, obeyed immediately. Plants began to emerge from the soil. First, perhaps, small green shoots breaking through the surface of the brown earth, timid but determined. Then, in an explosion of life and color that must have been breathtaking, trees began to grow in all directions. They did not grow slowly as we see today, taking years to reach their maturity. They grew instantly, or in a matter of hours, reaching their full and glorious form by divine command. Imagine the transformation. What was once a brown and gray desert was suddenly covered in vibrant green. Grasses sprouted, forming soft carpets. Shrubs spread out, their leaves swaying in the breeze that began to blow. Immense trees rose towards the sky, with robust trunks and leafy canopies. Flowers of every imaginable color adorned the ground like jewels scattered on green velvet. Red roses, white lilies, yellow sunflowers, purple violets, white daisies with golden centers, an explosion of colors that had never existed before. Each plant carried its own seed, ensuring that it would multiply and perpetuate through generations. Each tree produced its specific fruit. Apple trees with red and juicy apples, orange trees with round and fragrant oranges, vines with bunches of purple and green grapes, fig trees with sweet and nutritious figs. The diversity was impressive, the abundance overwhelming. The world, which moments before was empty, barren, and silent, was now full of plant life. There were colors where before there had only been shades of gray and brown. There was the scent of flowers where before there had only been the smell of wet earth. There was the promise of food, of beauty, of life-sustaining life. And God contemplated all this, the dry land emerging from the waters, the seas gathering in their designated places, the vegetation covering the earth with its green and colorful mantle, and saw that everything was very good. Not just good, but very good. Creation was taking shape in a magnificent way. On the fourth day, God turned his attention to the sky that he had created on the second day. That immense expanse that separated the upper waters from the lower ones, that vast space that was now ready to receive something special. God would create the great luminaries that would govern day and night, that would mark time and the seasons for all eternity. First, God created the sun, not as a small, distant light, but as a gigantic sphere of fire and energy, shining with an intensity impossible to look directly at. The sun was positioned at a perfect distance from the earth, neither so close that it would burn everything with its scorching heat, nor so far that it would leave everything frozen in an eternal winter. It was placed exactly where it needed to be to govern the day, to warm the earth, to nourish the plants with its light, to establish the cycle that would allow life to flourish. Imagine the moment when the sun was lit for the first time. The light that had existed since the first day, the divine light that came from no source, now had a physical bearer. The sun exploded into existence with all its golden splendor, illuminating the earth in a new and wonderful way. Its rays spread across the entire surface of the planet, touching the mountains, the valleys, the seas, the newly created plants. Everything shone under that warm and welcoming light. Then, God created the moon to rule the night, not as bright as the sun, but with its own serene, silvery beauty. The moon was made to reflect the sun's light during the dark hours, to bring a soft glow when the day ended. It would be a beacon in the night, guiding future travelers, marking the months with its phases, influencing the ocean tides with its silent gravitational pull. Imagine the moon appearing in the sky for the first time, a perfectly round sphere, shining with a silvery glow against the blackness of space, its surface marked by craters and mountains that only enhanced its mysterious beauty. But God didn't stop with the sun and the moon. He looked at the vast expanse of a night sky and decided to fill it with countless points of light. Stars, thousands of them, millions of them, billions of them, each one placed in its specific place by the hand of God. Each one with its own brilliance, its own color, its own story. Imagine the night sky being filled with stars. First a few, then more, then thousands appearing simultaneously like silent fireworks, until the entire celestial vault was studded with luminous points. Constellations were formed, the Southern Cross with its perfect cross, Orion with its belt of 3 stars, the Big Dipper always pointing north. The Milky Way stretched like a river of light across the sky, showing the immensity of God's creation. These luminaries were not created solely for beauty, although they were incredibly beautiful. They would serve to mark times, days, seasons, and years. The sun would mark each day with its rising and setting. The moon would mark the months with its waxing and waning phases. The stars would help mark the seasons, changing their positions in the sky as the Earth rotated in its orbit. Together, they would create a perfect cosmic clock, never failing, never running late, always accurate. None of these lights appeared by chance. No star formed randomly. Each one was intentionally placed by God in its designated place. The universe was not the result of a chaotic explosion, but of intelligent and purposeful design. And God looked at the sun ruling the day with its golden glow, at the moon ruling the night with its silvery light, at the countless stars twinkling in the vastness, and saw that it was good. The sky was now complete, illuminated, alive with light and movement. On the 5th day, God turned his gaze to 2 regions that until then had remained empty despite all his preparation: the waters of the deep seas and the expanse of the heavens that stretched over the earth. It was time to fill them with living creatures, with movement, with sounds, with the joy of animal life. God spoke, "Let the waters teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." And instantly, the seas that had been empty and silent since their creation began to teem with life of all shapes and sizes. Fish of every color appeared in the waters. Tiny silvery fish swam in enormous schools, moving as a single shimmering entity beneath the surface. Tropical fish with vibrant colors, electric blues, bright yellows, flaming oranges, neon greens, swimming among what would become future coral reefs. Large, powerful fish like tuna and marlin cutting through the waters with impressive speed. But it wasn't just fish. Even larger creatures were created to inhabit the depths of the oceans. Gigantic whales, the largest animals that would ever exist, began to swim through the seas, their songs echoing through the waters like mysterious symphonies. Dolphins leaped joyfully, playing in the waves with an intelligence evident in their bright eyes. Sharks patrolled the deeper waters with their predatory grace. Octopuses moved with their 8 tentacles, changing color to camouflage themselves. Jellyfish floated like transparent ghosts, pulsing with hypnotic beauty. The darkest depths of the oceans also gained their own creatures, bizarre and wondrous beings that glowed with their own bioluminescent light, perfectly adapted to live where sunlight never reached. Imagine the oceans transformed. What were once empty and silent waters were now teeming with life, movement, and color. Schools of thousands of fish moving in perfect synchronicity. Whales surfacing to breathe, launching columns of water into the air. Dolphins leaping in graceful arcs. Sea turtles swimming serenely. The sea had become a cradle of unparalleled life. Simultaneously, the skies were also being filled with life. Birds of every kind began to emerge and fly for the first time. Majestic eagles with enormous wings glided on the air currents, their keen eyesight capable of spotting a mouse miles away. Tiny hummingbirds, no bigger than a thumb, beat their wings so rapidly that they became a blur, hovering in the air as they sipped nectar from flowers. Songbirds filled the air with their melodies, nightingales, canaries, thrushes, each with its own unique and beautiful song. Colorful parrots flew in noisy flocks, their green, red, and blue plumage shimmering in the sun. Waterfowl were also created, ducks swimming gracefully in lakes, geese flying in perfect V formations, pelicans diving into the waters to fish, pink flamingos balancing on one leg. Birds of prey, such as hawks and owls, were given sharp talons and exceptional eyesight. Each bird was perfectly adapted to its environment and purpose. The sky, which had been empty except for the sun, moon, and stars, was now teeming with life. Wings flapping, feathers glistening in the sun, songs echoing, shadows moving across the earth below. It was a spectacle of movement and beauty. And God not only created these creatures from the waters and the skies, He personally blessed them, saying to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the waters of the seas and let birds multiply on the earth." It was a blessing of abundance, of continuity, of life generating more life. The fish would have offspring, the birds would hatch eggs, and life would spread throughout the planet. And God contemplated the seas, teeming with creatures of all shapes, sizes, and colors. He looked at the skies filled with birds flying, singing, living, and He saw that it was good. Creation was almost complete. Only one day remained, a very special day, when God would create His masterpiece. The 6th day dawned with the same glorious light as the previous days, but there was an anticipation in the air, as if all of creation knew that something special was about to happen. God would turn His attention to the dry land, that place covered in green and colorful vegetation, but still empty of earthly creatures. First, God created the animals of the earth in all their impressive diversity. Domestic animals emerged, sheep with their soft wool bleating gently, cows grazing calmly in the green fields, goats climbing rocks with surprising agility, horses galloping freely with their manes in the wind, loyal and friendly dogs, independent and graceful cats. Then came the wild animals, each unique and wonderful in its own way. Majestic lions with their golden manes roaring their authority over the savannah. Gigantic elephants walking with earth-shaking strides, their intelligence evident in their wise eyes. Giraffes with their impossibly long necks reaching the highest leaves of the trees. Zebras with their perfectly symmetrical black and white stripes. Powerful bears, striped tigers, spotted leopards, howling wolves, cunning foxes, leaping squirrels. Even more exotic creatures were created. Rhinoceroses with their impressive horns, hippos grazing on riverbanks, crocodiles lurking in shallow waters, monkeys swinging from branch to branch in the forests that were beginning to form, sloths hanging upside down, kangaroos hopping across the land that would one day become Australia. Reptiles of all shapes also emerged. Snakes slithering silently through the grass, lizards basking in the sun, chameleons changing color to camouflage themselves, tortoises carrying their homes on their backs, iguanas resting on the warm rocks. Even the insects were created that day, bees working tirelessly, ants building their complex anthills, colorful butterflies fluttering from flower to flower, crickets singing their nocturnal songs, fireflies illuminating the nights with their magical lights. The earth, which had been silent, was now filled with sounds, roars, howls, barks, meows, bleats, moos, whistles, trills. It was full of movement, animals running, jumping, crawling, climbing. It was full of life in its most diverse and wonderful expression. Each animal was created according to its kind, with unique characteristics and specific purposes. Carnivores with sharp teeth and powerful claws. Herbivores with flat teeth for grinding plants. Some fast, some slow. Some large, some tiny. But all perfect in their design, all suited to their environment. And God looked at all this diversity of animal life and saw that it was good. But something was still missing. Creation was almost complete, but not entirely. There was a void, an absence. None of the creatures created up to that point could truly know God, relate to Him, consciously worship Him, reflect His attributes. It was then that God said something completely different from everything He had said until then. For the first time in all of creation, God did not simply say, "Let there be," or produce. For the first time, He spoke as if in counsel, in consultation, in profound decision. "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." It was a solemn, sacred moment, unique in the entire creation narrative. God was about to create something that would be fundamentally different from everything else. Not just another creature, but a creature made in His own image. And God formed man. He did not merely speak a word for him to instantly appear. God knelt down, so to speak, and with His own hands molded man from the dust of the earth, from that same red and brown soil from which plants grow. They grew. Like a potter working with clay, God carefully formed each part, the head, the torso, the arms, the hands with their delicate fingers, the legs, the feet. He formed the internal organs, each with its specific function. He formed the brain, capable of complex and profound thoughts. He formed the eyes to see the beauty of creation. He formed the ears to hear the sounds of a world. He formed the mouth to speak, to communicate, to express thoughts and emotions. But there, lying on the garden floor, was only an inert body, perfect in its form but lifeless, without movement, without consciousness. Then came the most intimate and sacred moment of all creation. God leaned over that clay body and breathed into its nostrils the breath of life. It was not just air, but the very divine breath, the spirit of life coming directly from God. And man became a living soul. His eyes opened for the first time. His lungs filled with air. His heart began to beat. Blood began to flow through his veins. He blinked, looking around with admiration and amazement. He moved his fingers, testing them. He rose from the ground where he had been formed, standing upright for the first time, unlike all the other animals. His name was Adam, which means formed from the earth, or red man, referring to the soil from which he was created. God looked at Adam with paternal love. Here was his masterpiece, his most special creation. A being made in God's image, capable of thinking, choosing, loving, creating, and worshiping. A being with whom God could have true communion. Then God prepared a special place for Adam to live. He did not place him just anywhere on earth, but planted a garden in Eden, in the east. This garden was unlike any other place on the planet. It was paradise in its purest and most perfect expression. The Garden of Eden was a place of indescribable beauty. Majestic trees grew everywhere, not only fruit trees with their delicious fruits, but ornamental trees with lush, fragrant flowers. Crystal clear rivers meandered through the garden, their waters so pure they could be drunk directly. The banks of these rivers were covered with green grass as soft as carpet. Flowers of every imaginable color grew in profusion, roses, lilies, orchids, jasmines filling the air with their sweet perfumes. There was a main river that originated in Eden and then divided into 4 branches, irrigating the entire garden and the surrounding lands. The climate was perfect, neither too hot nor too cold, always pleasant. Sunlight filtered through the treetops, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. Birds sang their most beautiful melodies. Peaceful animals grazed together, without fear of one another, for there was still no violence or predation. In the center of the garden, God placed two very special trees: the tree of life, whose fruit granted immortality, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which would be a test of obedience and trust. God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden to care for it and cultivate it. He gave him authority over all creation. He brought all the animals to Adam so that he could name them, exercising his authority and demonstrating his intelligence. And Adam named each creature, each animal, each bird, each living creature received its name from Adam. But while Adam was naming the animals, something became evident. Each animal had its mate. The lions had lionesses. The eagles had their mates. The sheep had their rams. But for Adam, a suitable companion could not be found. God, who already knew this from the beginning, said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper suitable for him." Then God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. It was not an ordinary sleep, but a kind of divine trance. While Adam slept soundly, God performed the first surgery in history. He took one of his ribs, closed the place with flesh, and from the rib, he formed the woman. She was not made from the dust of the earth like Adam, but from his own body, showing that they were of the same essence, equal in value and dignity. She was not made from his head to dominate him, nor from his feet to be trampled on, but from his side, near his heart, to be loved and protected. When Adam awoke and saw the woman for the first time, it was instant love. He exclaimed with joy, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." Her name was Eve, which means mother of all living, for from her would be born all future humanity. God blessed them both together. He did not bless just Adam, but Adam and Eve as a unit. He said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on the earth." It was a commission, a purpose, a calling. They were to have children, populate the earth, and care for God's creation as faithful stewards. They had authority over every living creature, but was an authority of care and protection, not of exploitation or cruelty. God also gave them abundant provision. He said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. They will be yours for food." There was no hunger in Eden. There was no scarcity. There was abundance everywhere. Delicious fruits hung from the trees, ready to be picked. Vegetables grew in the gardens. There was fresh, pure water to drink. All needs were completely met. Adam and Eve walked through the garden in perfect innocence. They were naked, but they felt no shame, for there was no sin, no malice, nothing wrong between them. They spoke freely with God, who came to walk with them in the garden in the cool of the day. There was perfect communion between the Creator and His creatures. Adam's work was not arduous or tiring. It was pleasurable, meaningful. He cared for the garden with joy, pruning here, planting there, harvesting ripe fruits. Eve was by his side, his perfect companion, working with him, talking with him, laughing with him. There was no pain. There was no sadness. There was no death. There were no tears. There was no loneliness. There was no fear. It was paradise in its truest and most complete sense. And God looked at all that He had made during those 6 days of creation. He looked at the light and the darkness. He looked at the sky, separating the waters. He looked at the dry land and the seas. He looked at the vegetation covering the earth. He looked at the sun, the moon, and the stars. He looked at the fish in the seas and the birds in the skies. He looked at the land animals in all their diversity. And He looked at man and woman, made in His image, living in the perfect garden He had prepared for them. And God saw that everything was very good. Not just good, but very good. Perfect, complete, exactly as planned from before the foundation of the world. On the seventh day, something different happened. God created nothing new. The work of creation was complete, finished, perfect. Everything that needed to exist already existed. Everything that needed to be done had already been done. Then God rested, not because He was tired or exhausted. The Creator of the universe does not tire. He who holds the stars in their places does not need physical rest. Isaiah the prophet would write centuries later, "Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary." God rested not out of necessity, but to establish an eternal principle, a pattern for his creatures to follow. Rest, pause, time to contemplate, time to reflect, time for communion. Imagine that seventh day in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve not working, but resting, appreciating all that God had created. Perhaps they walked slowly through the garden, admiring each tree, each flower, each creature. Perhaps they sat by the riverbank, listening to the gentle sound of the flowing water, feeling the cool breeze on their faces. Perhaps they looked at the sky, marveling at the white clouds floating against the perfect blue, or at the stars twinkling at night. And perhaps in the cool of the day, when the air was freshest, God walked with them, not as a distant and inaccessible God, but as a father conversing with his children, explaining his creation to them, answering their questions, laughing with them, delighting in their company. The seventh day was blessed by God in a special way. He sanctified it, set it apart as holy, as different from the other days. It was not just another day in the cycle of time. It was a holy day, a day dedicated to rest, contemplation, worship, and communion. This principle of rest would later be incorporated into the 10 Commandments that God would give to Moses on Mount Sinai. The Sabbath, the day of rest, would be a constant reminder of that first week of creation, a memorial of God's creative power and the importance of rest. But the rest of the seventh day also pointed to something greater. It pointed to a future rest, a spiritual rest that would come through Jesus Christ. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews would explain that there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God, a final and eternal rest where there would be no more arduous work, no more weariness, no more struggle, only perfect rest in the presence of God. On the seventh day, creation was complete. The heavens declared the glory of God. The firmaments proclaimed the work of his hands. The earth was full of his goodness, and everything was very good. Thus ends the narrative of the creation of the world as recorded in the first chapter of Genesis. 6 days of creative work culminating in a day of sacred rest. From nothing to everything, from chaos to order, from emptiness to fullness, from darkness to light. But this story is much more than a simple account of how the world began. It reveals profound truths about God, about ourselves, and about the purpose of existence. First, we learn that creation was not an accident. It was not the result of random and purposeless processes. It was not the product of blind chance operating over infinite eons. It was the work of an intelligent, powerful, loving, and intentional God. Every aspect of creation was planned. Every detail was thought out. Every creature was designed with purpose. Second, we learn that there is order in the universe because there is a God of order. The laws of physics that govern the movement of the planets, the laws of chemistry that determine how atoms combine, the laws of biology that regulate life, all these laws exist because they were established by a lawgiver. The universe is not chaotic. It is ordered, predictable, understandable, because it was created by an ordered mind. Third, we learn that we are special. Of all the creatures created by God, the countless stars, the fish in the seas, the birds in the skies, the animals on the earth, only human beings were made in the image of God. Only we receive the divine breath of life. Only we have the capacity to know our Creator, to relate to Him, to reflect His attributes of love, creativity, justice, and mercy. This gives us unparalleled dignity. No matter what the world says about you, no matter how you feel about yourself, this truth remains. You were created in the image of Almighty God. You are not an accident. You are not insignificant. You are not worthless. You are loved, planned, and created with purpose. Fourth, we learn that God is a God of abundance and generosity. He did not create the world as an austere prison, but as a lush garden. He did not create only what is necessary for survival, but filled the earth with beauty, color, variety, and pleasure. Flowers are not just functional, they are beautiful. The sunset is not just the end of the day, it is a spectacle of colors. Birds not only exist, they sing. God could have created a monochromatic and functional world, but He chose to create a world full of beauty because He is good and generous. Fifth, we learn that work is good and meaningful. God did not create Adam to be idle in the garden, but to care for it and cultivate it. Work is not a curse, but a blessing when done according to God's purpose. We were created to be productive, to create, to care for God's creation. Work gives us purpose and meaning. Sixth, we learn that rest is essential. God rested himself on the seventh day, not out of weakness, but to teach us that we are more than just workers. We are relational beings who need time to contemplate, to reflect, to connect with God and with each other. A life without rest is an unbalanced life. Seventh, we learn that God desires fellowship with us. He did not create man and then abandoned him. He walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. He talked to them. He had a relationship with them. And even today, despite everything that has happened since, God still seeks to have fellowship with his children. The same powerful voice that said, "Let there be light," and there was light, the same voice that called the stars into existence, and they obeyed, the same voice that breathed life into Adam's nostrils, that same voice still speaks to human hearts today. It speaks through the creation that surrounds us, declaring the glory of God. It speaks through the Holy Scriptures, revealing God's will. It speaks through the Holy Spirit, touching our consciences and drawing us to God. And this story of creation does not end in the Garden of Eden. It continues through the pages of the Bible. We know that Adam and Eve sinned, disobeying the only command God had given them. We know that sin brought death, pain, and separation from God. The perfect garden was lost. Perfect communion was broken. But God did not abandon his creation. The story continues with the promise of redemption. Soon after the sin, God promised that a Savior would come, a descendant of the woman who would crush the serpent's head. This promise was fulfilled thousands of years later when Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was born in Bethlehem. Jesus came to restore what was lost in Eden. He came to reconcile humanity with God. Through his death on the cross and resurrection, he opened a way back to God. And one day, as the Scriptures promise, there will be new heavens and a new earth. Paradise will be restored. Communion with God will be complete again. There will be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain, for the former things will have passed away. Creation, therefore, is the beginning of a larger story. It is the prologue to a narrative that includes fall and redemption, judgment and grace, separation and reconciliation. It is a story that is being written even today, and you are part of it. When we look around us at the blue sky above, at the green earth below, at the mountains in the distance, at the vast oceans, at the trees swaying in the wind, at the birds flying, at the stars twinkling at night, we are seeing the work of God's hands. Every detail of creation proclaims that there is a creator. Every flower testifies to a designer. Every star declares his glory. And when we look in the mirror, we see something even more wonderful. We see the image of God. Imperfect because of sin, yes. Broken by the fall, certainly. But still, the image remains. We still have value. We still have purpose. We are still loved by our Creator. The God who created the universe with a word, who painted the sunset with glorious colors, who sculpted the mountains and filled the seas, who counted the stars and called each one by name. That same God knows you. He created you. He loves you. He has a purpose for your life. Creation reminds us that we are not here by chance. We are not products of random, meaningless processes. We are intentional creations of a loving God. And just as God looked at his creation and said, "It is very good," he looks at you with the same love and approval. May this story of creation fill your heart with wonder for the Creator. May it give you hope, knowing that you were created with purpose. May it inspire you to care for God's creation as faithful stewards. May it remind you to rest as God rested. And may it point you to the Savior, Jesus Christ, who came to restore all that was lost. The story began with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." But it doesn't end there. It continues with you, with your life, with your choices, with your response to the Creator who loves you. May God, the Creator of heaven and earth, bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and give you peace. And may you always remember that you were created in God's image, with purpose, with value, and with an eternal destiny. This is the story of the creation of the world according to the Holy Bible. A story of power, order, beauty, and love. A story that began in the beginning and continues to this day. a story of which you are a part. Amen.